Pat, we've reached probably the most pinnacle, if not one of the most pinnacle episodes of the entire show. Season 4, episode 2, The Lion and the Rose, big episode for a multitude of different occasions, namely being the episode I finally get to kiss Joffrey goodbye. Probably, I'd say there's an argument to be made that this is the most satisfying death of Game of Thrones, although, as we are going to discuss later on in the episode, we have a certain symbolic passing of the torch that happens in this episode from one resident psychopath to another. You got anything to say before we get into this?
Yeah, Dom. So, hey, the Talkin TV family is going to like it when I say, there's a lion, there's a rose, there's some poison, there's, another methodical, sadistic guy who's, in our lives. So this episode got more than just that lion and the rose.
Indeed. All of that and more on tonight's episode of Talking Thrones. You know something, Pat, even though the title of this episode is brilliant and symbolic as far as, where it's going, the direction that it's taken the show, where we're going to kind of follow the Lannisters in their quest over the next couple of seasons. I think an alternative party would also be a good alternative title for this would also be Lannister House Party. I don't know. What do you think?
Hey, yeah, for sure. Or how about this? There's poison in that wine.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good one.
Be right on the nose.
Exactly.
Like,
I mean, why not?
Who's going to get it? Tyrion drinks a lot of wine.
He does indeed. Yeah, I mean, this episode is pivotal for a lot of different reasons. We're unfortunately at the end of wedding season that we've covered in the last couple episodes. We had 2 back-to-back weddings last season. Tyrion's wedding, and then unfortunately Edmure Tully's wedding. We all saw how that went. We already spent all of last week in the last episode talking about the Red Wedding. But this is an interesting one. This is a pivotal moment, I think, that continued to signify kind of the change in direction the show was going. This is famously the last episode written by George R.R. Martin. And I talked in the past also about how this show borrows a lot of beats from The Sopranos. But I think this one borrows the most in the sense that the entire second half of this episode, I checked the timing mark too. I checked it because the last couple times that I've watched this episode, I think this is the episode that I might have watched the most from this entire show. And the entire second half hour of this episode, from like minute 30 onward, is all just focused on this wedding ceremony and the party that happens afterwards. Because
yeah, Dom, when you say this took a lot of thing from The Sopranos, the only thing that came to my mind was Tywin Lannister riding a horse casually from New York to New Jersey.
Hey man, I mean, I don't know what the Westerosi terminology for New York and New Jersey is in this world.
Yeah, maybe it's from Castle Rock to King's Landing. He's just
who knows? I mean, opposite sides of the continent and all that, but it's a little bit difficult to keep track of. But people, this is without a doubt. It's so interesting because this is the episode that follows up the Red Wedding, which we obviously know is gangbusters. But I make an argument to say that this episode is just as important and crucial as this episode is, because very similar to what happened with the Starks in the first 3 seasons of this show, this episode, I think, much more so than the last episode, ultimately signifies so death is finished with House Stark and is coming for House Lannister. This is the beginning of the Lannisters really starting to reap the fruit of their labors, as far as all the people that they've hurt, all the pain that they've inflicted in their mad quest for power throughout the entirety of the realm. And this is the ultimate celebration of their excess and victory, and the crows have indeed come home to roost, because as we see all the Lannisters start dropping like flies from this moment onward. Like I said, this is famously the episode. This is the last episode we have with Joffrey Baratheon alive before he's ultimately poisoned. Tywin Lannister dies at the end of this season. Myrcella Baratheon and Tommen Baratheon are lost over the course of the next 2 seasons until we're only left with the main 3 Lannister kids. I don't know, Pat, what are your thoughts on that before we dive into this episode?
Yeah, I think the one thing that the Lannisters didn't really account for with the Game of Thrones is they thought they could actually just, take the Starks, they could really beat them down, eliminate them as a house, show the entire realm that, hey, if you mess with the Lannisters, look at what we did to Ned Stark, Arya, Robb, like Sansa, like, pretty much, we did all this to the Starks. We eliminated them from the face of the planet. We basically humiliated them. We're standing tall. I guess like Dwayne the Rock Johnson in that remake, they're standing tall or walking tall.
Walking tall. That's the one. I
was this close on the reference, but
so close.
Basically, the Lannisters have done all this, and they are trying to rule through dread, right? Everyone's going to sort of bow to them. But what they didn't realize is that when they play the game, this kind of chaos opens the door for other challengers. And this is where Oberon comes in. He's in town to get revenge over what happened to his family members. And so, that's going to escalate. And there's other escalations that are in the wings that are going to sort of, basically bite back. And so it's one of those misconceptions that the Lannisters had, was that, we could quickly win this war, quickly snub out the Starks, and essentially, we can rule with an iron fist. And they continued to do that throughout the entire series. But ultimately, the way that they won the throne, has repercussions, and those repercussions, as you said, are going to be those crows coming back to roost.
Yes, indeed. This is another episode that focuses primarily the bulk of its action in King's Landing. Like I said, this is the episode where we've been hearing about it for an entire season. We finally see a Joffrey's wedding. Is the primary centerpiece of this entire episode. We spend a bulk of the episode there. We've got a few other storylines that happen in other parts, but it's another episode that features predominantly in King's Landing. So I totally forgot what I was just going to say next, the point that I was going to bring up, but let's dive right in with our opening scene. We're going to hit all the other storylines real quick before we focus in on King's Landing. There's so much to happen. There's so many details, so many different important scenes, so many different micro character moments that happen in this episode that ultimately shows what's going to happen next. So we start off opening scene, the Dreadfort.
Yeah, old man Bolton. I guess that's
maybe not even
right?
that.
No, that's not the opening scene.
Oh, that's not the opening scene.
Oh no, the hunting. Yes, I forgot about the hunting scene.
Again, they're doing that thing that we always see that really has become kind of primary the thing since season 3 really were, because there's so many characters and settings out that we got to split up the action primarily across like the first 2 episodes. Where last episode, and besides King's Landing, which we spent the majority of the bulk in for the first 2 episodes. Last episode we got Daenerys, we got Arya. This episode we get and Jon. Last episode, this episode we get Ramsay and Theon. We get Stannis. We get we check back in with Bran briefly, basically our remaining survivors. So we got a couple storylines that we still set up.
Me, Dom, like when it comes down to the sadistic nature of Ramsay Bolton, I tend to want to forget all the stuff I've seen.
Oh, I know.
So, hey, today's sadistic moment of the week is he's hanging out with his mistress, I guess is the best way to put it. Miranda, and they're running through the woods with the hounds and some bows and arrows, and I guess one of the other ladies hanging out at the court.
Confirmed by resident Talkin Thrones superfan Eric Thorpe and multiple other people, that is indeed a different girl than the one we saw last season with Miranda trying to seduce Theon.
Yeah, so it's essentially, the whole idea is that Ramsay has, his choice of women in this, Dreadfort, or just in his father's kingdom in general, and basically he's done with her. And he comes up with a flimsy excuse that Miranda is jealous. And, to the point where she's like, no, I'm not. He knows what their relationship is at this point. But,
I love Ewan Rand's facial expressions in that scene. It just shows that as much of a psychopath as Ramsay is, he's so good. It's one of those things where it's like, I get that you're like, a decent, like really pretty cool human being in real life, but he's so good at the part. You almost have to wonder. It's like, he's almost a little too good at how like comedic he's playing it, where he does this like little like awkward back and forth, like he's in the middle of a rom-com, and he's like, you can see how this has started to make things a little complicated. And I'm just like, oh my God, like the way that these people are able to handle like the amount of inherent like psychopathy that these characters experience and just treat it like a casual, everyday, normal bad. It's wild to me.
Yeah. So hey, they hunt this girl down and basically allow the hounds to take her out, and it's all because he's had his way with her, and she now bores him, and it's sort of like a nonchalant way for him to sadistically dispose of someone that he no longer needs. And he has Miranda. Obviously, that's his main belle. But like for the most part, he's gonna have any other woman that comes along. And when Papa Bolton does show up, he has a new wife that comes in the town. And there is a little bit of a courting going on. Like he goes ahead and gives his new mom a kiss on the cheek, etc. And it's sort of coinciding with him just murdering, some, young woman, and then like, hey, here's your new mother coming to town. I don't think she's in a safe space, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely not. Well, I mean, let's face it. Where in all of Westeros or this entire freaking show is a safe space? Let's if we're defining it by those terms. But Ramsay obviously is playing a very intricate game here. But also, there's a lot of things to take away. First, from that opening scene, just the expression on Theon's face. I love the way that Alfie Allen plays. Like from here on out, like to me, this is like peak Alfie Allen. Like these middle couple seasons, 4 through 6, are like peak Alfie Allen performance. Like the first couple seasons, he did a really great job of like balancing like Theon's insecurity with his kind of overburgeoning cockiness that he tries to display. That kind of we see the cracks in further and further. And season 3 was a really interesting point where we saw him probably at his most vulnerable before he gets broken down. But the thing that I love about his performance in the years that he has to like perform as Reek is the sense is that you can still see Theon like buried underneath there, but he's almost like it's like he's stuck in this halfway point between having to put up this performance as Reek, while at the same time also like kind of being stuck as like, okay, this is the new position that I have to maintain, and like how he's able to like carry the amount of pain and torture that he's forced to experience as Ramsay's plaything. It's wild stuff, and all
I would say I agree with you. I love his performance, and it's a shame that basically that's all he does for the rest of the series is kind of stand there. I think at one point, at one point he picks up, he cries a lot. And at one point he picks up a sword and does kill a couple White Walkers, but mainly gets murdered by them.
It sort of pays off. I think there are a couple good moments in the last day. I think Theon, ironically enough, I think they dropped the ball harder on Theon in season 6. I don't necessarily think. I think that all that Theon is a victim of in the last season is just the fact that there were only 6 episodes and they only had so much time to really flesh out a certain characters, and they knew that they were clearing at least half the board with the long night. So I think if anything, it was season 7 that did Theon dirtier than the final season. But then, of course, once we get to Roose arriving back at the Dreadfort, and obviously, it's interesting because obviously we know about their relationship from the finale, but this is the first time that we see these two, back together, just generally, as kind of like our new like anchor points in the North now that the Starks are gone, and we see the relationship instantaneously like is fractured. It's fractured.
Well,
it's
like. It basically Ramsay hasn't listened to Roose at all, right? So it's like, what have you done with Theon? He was our bargaining chip, etc. And I will say this is I forgot the name of the city, but it's the choke point, right?
Moat Kylan.
What?
Moat Kylan is the name of it.
Okay, so the moat, right?
Yes.
Essentially is the way that they need to get their armies up north to be able to solidify their power.
Just to put it in perspective from a geographical standpoint, with the way that Moat Kylan is shaped, as far as where it's positioned, like if you look at like a map of Westeros, like on the that little passage point between the north and the south, that's called the neck. Basically, Moat Kylan, from a geographical standpoint, it's one of those things where if you try to march an army on it, it's one of those castles that you literally can't. Whoever has control of that castle literally controls the back and forth point between the north and the south. Like no army can get through that marching directly from the south, and it's currently controlled by the Ironborn.
Yeah, exactly, and so that's where sending Theon's favorite toy to his father is not good for the Boltons, right? And for the most part, it logically doesn't make any sense. Like you're not going to trade Theon for an entire choke point that will define the power for like generations. Like the Ironborn are all about paying the iron price, and that really just means being stubbornly stupid to your plan and never backing down.
Oh man!
And
what a smorgasbord of back and forth as far as what the North has become, where we have to choose between rooting for the Boltons or the Ironborn. What a conundrum that is right there, as far as who is in a competition to be less likable.
So the main thing I think, and this is where Ramsay's trying to get his point across, is like Roose doesn't like the fact that he flayed Theon because Theon's a bargaining chip. But Ramsay has done, miracles with his torture and, has created this new character called Reek. And he does a demonstration, right? The whole kind of like, hey, Reek here is, I'm going to give him a sharp blade and he's going to, shave my beard. And he could kill me at any time, but he's not going to. That's basically the subtext here. And, he impresses Roos, in his ability to sort of command and get results like that from, the methods that the house has been known for, which is flaying people and torturing them. That, he basically says, okay, well, you might have ruined this bargaining chip, but that's not a problem. You're ruthless. You're sort of a problem solver. And so he tells him, like, I'll reconsider your position in the family. This is where I guess it's Ramsay Snow. We're kind of introduced to the fact that he's just a bastard as well, as Jon Snow is.
Where it's officially confirmed.
Yeah, exactly. And so what's happening is basically it's like, okay, you stepped up. You've adopted these methods. You've done it really well. And now if you step up again, go take that moat, that castle, from the Greyjoys or whatever. And, basically, hey, I'll reconsider your position in the family. And that's where Ramsay is, focused on because, he wants to really, be a big part of the Boltons. He wants to take leadership.
Not to mention the fact that he reveals to his father a crucial bit of information that is fundamentally important to rule over the North. Like he said,
100% during the shaving.
Tywin Lannister helped them in their quest to betray and murder Robb Stark so that the Boltons could gain control over the North from the Starks. But like he said, the Tywin will not lift a finger to help Bolton wrest and control the North. So it's ultimately up to the Boltons in order to get the rest of the Ironborn out of the North. On top of the fact that Ramsay reveals the bit of information that he learned from Theon last season when Theon didn't know who he was. Bran and Rickon are still alive. And they're out there.
Yeah,
and Theon reveals
perfect. It's perfect barbershop talk, right? It's like, hey, give me a little shave, and why don't you tell my pops here what's going on?
Yeah, how'd you kill? It's like, where are Bran and Rickon? And he's like, I don't know. And he's like, and Roose is like, you killed them. And he's like, no, I didn't. I just killed 2 farm boys and burned their corpses so badly that nobody would be able to know. Yeah. And Ramsay kind of flips that out on his dad and then shows, oh, so you think I'm psychotic, huh? Well, I got something that you need right here. And so Roose is going to flip that with the Moat Kylan thing, and he kind of deviates them. He's going to send Ramsay.
I think Theon. Ramsay says at some point, you crest them right up, right? Like the farm boys. It's really weird how he puts it. And it's, this is one of those scenes where you're taking the everyday sort of like barbershop, like, you have a group of guys who are just, BSing, figuring things out about, local gossip and all that type of stuff. It's sort of an everyday type of mundane scene. It's a community, right? But you basically have these, 3 cutthroats and, Theon, who tried to be a cutthroat but didn't quite, make it to their leagues. And they're just chatting, and they're just doing it over a shave.
Yep, and as we see, so Roose is going to have Ramsay and Theon go and get Moat Kylan. If they can get Moat Kylan, they can bring the Bolton armies back north and get rid of the rest of the Ironborn who are still stationed throughout the rest of the North. And then he says to Locke, he's like, so where could they possibly go? And they're like, Jon Snow's at Castle Black. And this is the one bit of unbelievable part. I find it hard to believe that the Boltons have no idea who Jon. Actually, wait, no, sorry. I take that back. I just realized Locke doesn't know who Jon is, but the Boltons know who Jon is.
They explain it to him. But at the same time, like Theon, this is one of the things where talking to the acting, essentially, like he could have made up anything. He could have been like, they went east. I think, that's at least where they told me they were going. Like, but the fact is he weighs visually whether or not he should tell or not. And he's conflicted. He's kind of shaking. And then he gives the safe answer, which is, he's probably hanging out with Jon Snow.
Right.
And that's what he hopes, because the Boltons, don't have their armies right now, and they're not necessarily going to go up and storm Castle Black, initially. So it's one of those things where if they pursue that route, and Bran just happens to be there, he's probably going to be relatively safe. Like he's out of the reach of the Boltons.
At least so we think.
Yeah. So, Theon doesn't know, right? He's just at this point trying to give a safe answer so that he's not harmed any further than he already has been. And he knows just from the conditioning that Ramsey has put him through, that, you know, he has to sort of tell something that's logical and seemingly helpful to them. And that's why he tells them sort of the truth. But he peppers it in like, you know, hey, Jon Snow and the Night's Watch, they're watching Bran's back. So, you know, it's going to be a tough time.
You're going to have to be careful. Yeah, speaking of which, Bran, we cut briefly to north of the wall. We check back in with Bran. Quick Bran sequence, not a whole lot of Bran
Yeah.
in this entire season. They get
Like,
this is where they really start to get fast and loose with some of the storylines because, again, like I said, only got about that much of Storm of Swords, so they got to really make up some shit in order to give these characters something to do. Like I said, Stannis does not have much to do this season. Bran does not have much to do this season, but we got a brief
So it starts off with the wolf just eating some chow, and you know, it's like, Bran, wake up. He's like, I was just eating. You know, it's like no, like, dummy.
You weren't.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, don't forget who you are. Like, you shouldn't be doing stuff like that. A little bit of
foreshadowing to his training with the Three-Eyed Raven later on. It's like,
exactly.
Don't get stuck in that wolf's head. But you can say, and I will give credit where credit is due. I don't think Isaac M said right again. Everybody, he's getting almost to the point now where it's like people. This is, I feel like, it's the most forgettable part of his journey because he's no longer a little kid Bran. Like, he's gotten a little bit older. He's like 14. He's like 14, 15 now. So he really has hit that growth spurt. But he's not quite Three-Eyed Raven Bran yet, where he's just boring and monotone and completely emotionless. But everybody seems to forget this period of Bran's arc, especially because, you know, he's not in this season a whole lot. And then he goes an entire season of just not being on screen. But I do have to give a lot of credit to Isaac Hempstead for his acting, where everyone else, like Jojen and Mira, are telling him like all the consequences of what would happen if he was just stuck in Summer's body. But you can see all the emotions that come out of his face. It's like he's sullen, he's angry, he's depressed, he's still not quite sure if they're at a point where their journey is actually going to be meaningful. And all that he knows right now is that when he wargs, he has everything that he lost. He has the freedom, the mobility, the movement, the power that comes with being in the wolf's body. And the way that he portrays that all in his face without uttering a single word, I think is masterful.
Yeah, so essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, but in this season, he basically touches the tree, and then they meet the Three-Eyed Raven at the end of the season?
So there's also the whole thing that where they end up getting captured at Craster's Keep by the Night's Watch mutineers, which is an entire storyline.
Oh, yeah, I totally forgot. Okay.
Right, exactly. Cool, which I will say right now, a little bit of foreshadowing for the midpoint of the season, but that is an entire storyline that is fabricated solely for the show because that never happens in the books. They never go north to Craster's Keep. Bran never gets kidnapped. They never have the thing with Locke. They don't kill all the mutineers. None of that. That is all completely original to the show.
Yeah, I think it's good. And whatchamacallit, it's the one actor. Man, I forgot his name. We already talked about it.
Vern Gorman.
Yeah, exactly. He's in like America's Spies or whatever, that AMC show. Turn, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
And he's in
come on, he's the other half of Charlie Day in Pacific Rim, man.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, how could you forget or how could I forget that? But the fact is, like, he's coming back to town this season, and hey, it's going to be a fun time with Bran. I think he's just kind of like,
the big takeaway here is he touches the weird tree, and he's got kind of like, in a strange way, like the Daenerys.
Yeah, to bring it back.
Yeah, she has the Daenerys vision that she had all the way back in season 2, where he has, like, again, kind of this mixing of like past, present, and future. It's a lot of visual stuff. It's kind of more stuff. We actually get to hear the Three-Eyed Raven talk for a little bit. It's some interesting stuff. It's just fun. It's just a little bit of quick filler there.
Yeah. What does he say? North. Basically that's it.
Come find this random tree, and Brad's like, I know where we need to go. I'm like, really? How? What, did you download a GPS into your brain? That's amazing if that's the case.
Yeah, it's like the Matrix, it's like just upload that information to Three-Eyed Raven.
Exactly, upload that information. We also had a quick stop in on Dragonstone as well again.
Oh god, yeah, what happened there?
Oh man.
Just some people burn.
It's more about burning random people.
Some more zealot stuff,
more zealot. The one thing I will say, couple takeaways. I do. There's one funny encounter where Selyse is just showing just how batshit insane she is, and she's like, "Oh, look, they're burning. Did you hear them? It's like, yeah. How could I miss it? They were literally burning alive 3 feet in front of me. Also,
it's like her souls. Their souls. Yeah. Did you see their souls? And it's like, wow.
Like I said, the dude who is screaming for Stannis's mercy that gets burned is Selyse's own brother, Axel Florin. Wild stuff, as she later says when she goes to visit what's it called, Shireen. But this sequence is kind of all just foreshadowing and set up. Stannis throws a quick jab at Davos, where Davos is like, yeah, they were your soldiers. How many soldiers did they give you? And Stannis is like, more than you, kind of signifying it's like, yes, Davos escaped by the skin of his teeth last season, but Stannis is still a little bit mad at him to kind of let their big sacrifice go, and they're kind of like burning all these people, almost as I feel like it's like kind of like in order to make up for losing Gendry last season. And then we have this really awkward dinner sit down where Melisandre is sitting with Stannis and Selyse. And I don't know what's weirder, the fact that Selyse is fully aware of the fact that Stannis and Melisandre had the fling a couple seasons ago, or that or the fact that she's okay with it because she's so devoutly devoted to the Lord of Light and everything. And she starts throwing out a bunch of stuff about Shireen and everything. Again, it's really weird because the problem is that Stannis is really the problem is that there's absolutely nothing that happens in between Stannis getting the letter, Davos receiving the letter and telling Stannis at the end of last season. The next thing we see with Stannis in the books is him sailing directly to the wall. So everything that happens in this season with Stannis is literal filler and also setting up for how I think they abominably wrap up his arc next season. So they got to set up the thing with Shireen where, as far as how she's going to be positioned as the next sacrifice. And so she's like, oh, Shireen, she's misbehaving. She's deviant. She's sinful. And Stannis is like, she's an 8-year-old girl. Pump the brakes there, Scooter. And Melisandre later goes and visits her in a really strange and awkward scene where she's kind of explaining the process of the Seven and how they're false gods and everything. And I like that Shireen's combating Melisandre back and forth. It's so she knows where she's coming from, but she also knows this woman is bad news.
Well, yeah, Shireen is basically well educated or educated enough. All she does is hang inside and read books and figure things out. So this is one of the reasons why it's believable that she's able to give Davos words of wisdom, and they also keep it in sort of the form that she is young and sort of doesn't know the whole picture. But it's a little bit of a war of words between Melisandre and her, and there's one hell, which is the place that we're living in now. Yes. And I think that's the greatest line of this whole scene is it just leads us to this place where it's there's the Lord of Light, there's the Lord of Dark, and hell is on earth. And we have to sort of make our peace with that. And so it's a very interesting scene, just giving us the point of view of Melisandre and what it means to really be fighting her war, which is ultimately to install Stannis as the rightful king and bring peace back to the land. The balance the way it should be, according to the Lord of Light.
Really odd foreshadowing also for kind of everything that would happen in our real world, as far as okay, this this place is hell and we just kind of have to make our way through it every day. I'm wow, how oddly foreshadowed that was. But let's get to it.
How oddly modern, I guess, is Melisandre.
Exactly. That's what I was looking for. But let's face it, all those storylines, they were good, they were filler. But let's get to the meat and potatoes. Everything that happens in King's Landing is beyond. Is there a single bad sequence that happens in King's Landing in this entire episode? Because I feel like every single scene from the beginning where we're introduced all the way to the end, it's just all bangers, nonstop.
Well, I think there's a lot of setups and for the rest of the season, yes. Shay, for instance, right? It's again, she comes into the chamber with Tyrion and really is trying to tempt him, but he is now at the height of his worry for her.
Before you jump ahead, let's start at the beginning, because like I said, there's a lot that we got to. First scene.
Yeah, I'm just jumping in there. I'm just saying there's a bunch of stuff that happens in this sequence, and what it is all set up for the remainder of the season. Yes. And just like King's Landing is about to sort of explode in many different directions.
Yes, like I said, we got a lot of very minimalistic King's Landing action last season, very withheld, very very plotting and scheming behind the scenes. Not a whole lot of direct action happening, as we see a lot of the stuff that was happening in King's Landing indirectly had a lot of action towards the rest of Westeros. But this season, in particular, this episode really shows the drama has come back to King's Landing, because we start off Jaime and Tyrion, they're eating a nice meal together as brothers again. It's the
wild boar, as Tyrion said, because Cersei can't get enough of it since King Robert was taken.
Since Robert was also inconspicuously murdered by one. But I think it's a great sequence. I love the relationship that's always developed between these two, as the only two Lannister siblings that seem to have some genuine care for each other outside of the usual just wanted to kill and backstab each other and not liking each other. And I really love the rapport. And he's now we can relate to each other. Now we're both kind of disappointments in Dad's eyes. And but Jaime,
well, it's the hand, right? It's yes. He doesn't have the hand, and Tyrion's trying to console him the best way he can, which is sort of blunt wordplay where it's hey, you lost a hand, not a stomach. Yes. Saying you better eat something.
Jimmy's going
you
through a
better
lot right
drink
now.
something, etc.
He lost his hand. He's not sure if he's still in Cersei's good graces. He's not Tywin's golden boy anymore. He was kind of like been forced to confront his own morality in a way that he wasn't sure. Jamie's going through a lot right now, and Tyrion's trying to console him without really fully understanding everything. But Tyrion, you can always get the sense that Tyrion, because again, Tyrion's been made so vulnerable in the last couple seasons that we forgot that when we were first introduced to Tyrion, Tyrion was the guy that was kind of like on the outset of everything, so he could like kind of help everyone else out with their problems. And you kind of see that happen with this scene here, where he's like, look, I can't fight anymore, which is kind of the only thing that I was really, good at. And also, if I try to train with my left hand, people are eventually going to talk. And he's like, you need the right swordsman. And of course, where does that lead to? The beginning of a new beautiful relationship. As like I said, we got Tyrion and Bronn for the first 3 seasons. Now we get the beginning of the Jaime and Bronn saga, as we see that'll happen over the next couple seasons, where Jaime and Bronn goes to meet with Jaime in a private location, and just to confirm, just to make sure, of course, that it is safe and discreet and that no one will hear him. And Bronn reminds him, he's like, there's this knight, I don't really remember his name. I fuck his wife in this spot. She's a screamer, that one. If they don't hear us, they're definitely not going to hear us training,
Yeah. So, Don, you could have kept that a little cleaner, but hey, Bronn's right. It basically, he goes down there for his adultery, with knights, the wife of a knight, and probably several other people, and it's very secluded. Although, it's very secluded for a nice little beachfront property. Like, yeah. I feel like everybody would be down there with pina coladas and having their affairs.
What convenient little square that's just placed in that like one little alcove. I'd really love to know what the architect original idea for that was, just when it was constructed. But yeah, and so they start training, and it's good stuff, because again, Bronn is not teaching Jaime like a master swordsman. He's teaching him like a sellsword. And he's like, yeah, you want to learn how to fight, you got to learn how to fight dirty. You don't have your right hand back. You got to learn how the real world works. And so I love that. I love how that starts to develop.
Next scene, it's right away. Like, Jaime basically is like, well, wait till I get my, bearings. And, Bronn's not going to do that. He's going to basically, push him. He's going to sort of trip him. He's going to bump him, with his shoulder, like do some shoulder blocks. He's going to do things that are unexpected, and he's going to teach him to fight, like you said, the dirtiest way possible, just so that he can always get the advantage on his opponent.
Right. I'll also point out Jaime and Bronn, another duo that is completely original to the show. That obviously, that was a duo that was never, that never happened in the books. Like I said, this is the season where we really start to deviate from the books heavily, because famously in the books, Jaime only trains with a character that has been completely removed from the screen, that being Ilan Payne, the executioner, who of course is missing a tongue. So he's like, who better to make sure that he'll literally never tell? Jaime and Bronn, the rapport that developed between those two never happens in the books. But I think it's one of the things that
I will say, when just to jump in on the book situation, is like, anytime that you adapt a work of fiction from writing, from novel form, you always have to sort of consolidate and basically take a lot of the storylines and bunch it down to a group of characters that the audience can follow and pay attention and actually get on their side or despise or whatever. And so this show, notoriously has so many characters, that it's amazing that we can even follow them all. But the fact is, like, if we had, 30 more characters, it might get a little more tedious to, have to count all these characters and remember them all and all that stuff. So, like, consolidating some storylines into the main characters that people have clearly gravitated towards, like Bronn, Tyrion, etc. That's totally a smart filmmaking, smart television making.
Well, the other thing that it goes into as well is the fact that how the relationship with Jaime and Tyrion goes in the books as opposed to the show, which is it goes very, very differently in the books as opposed to the show. Where in the books, Tyrion and Jaime reach a point of no return, where Jaime arrives in the city famously in the books after Joffrey's wedding. Like, Jaime doesn't arrive in the city in the books until after Joffrey's already dead. He doesn't even he kind of like realizes it to himself. But Jaime is not there for the wedding. Famously, he never sees Tyrion. He never has that whole meeting with him. By the time he arrives there, Tyrion is in jail already, and he has to hear it from Tywin himself. And the whole thing is that when he goes to free Tyrion, he famously admits something that is never a thing in the books, which is where he admits that he actually had a part in selecting the prostitute that Tyrion ultimately married and kind of arranged for the whole thing to happen, which is something that Tyrion never had any knowledge of. And Tyrion kind of curses him out and rejects him as his family as well. And also kind of murders Tywin as part of like a dig at Jaime, which is also something that they completely cut from the book as well, in the sense of where they're kind of using the Bronn in order to like form this bridge with Jaime and Tyrion, because they know that they're setting it up for Tyrion to go to Essos and eventually go to Daenerys. So they're trying to be able to rekindle some bond and forge between the two of them so that they can have Jaime come back to fight in the White Walkers. But I have a feeling that's not the direction at all that they're choosing to go in the book. So that's just a really interesting little tidbit that I wanted to point out there as well. Next big scene, obviously, this is also the thing that continues to set up Tyrion for failure. Tyrion and Shay, they unfortunately have to go bye-bye. Varys, who I famously said was absent in the last episode, he warns Tyrion of Cersei's handmaiden kind of spying on them in their room. He says Cersei now knows Shay's identity. She is in even more danger now before. See, before it was just a matter of Varys trying to get Shay out of the way so that Tyrion could focus on the game. Yeah. Now Shay's in legit danger.
They're very on the nose about Shay, and the danger she's in. Like, even at the wedding, Cersei goes to Tywin and is like, see that woman over there? That's her. So like Tywin says something like, bring her up to the the Tower of the Hound, I believe.
To the hand. Yeah, again, more
the hand.
Foreshadowing.
I totally I guess I misheard that. But the main thing is, like, it's quite clear that she's been identified by Tywin and Cersei, that something's going to take place. We won't know because it takes place off screen for this season,
right?
But ultimately, at the end of the day, Shay is a target, and it's no longer like you're going to be in harm's way. It's you are in harm's way, and for us, the audience, it's just a matter of waiting for that shoe to drop, so to speak.
Well, it's another thing that's really interesting as far as how they deviated from the books in the show. And now that I'm actually watching it in person, as far as seeing how drastically they changed Shay of a character from the books into the show, it's really, really interesting, I think, where they have Tywin, they have her he has her brought to his tower in the head. We assume to presumably have her tortured or maimed or something absolutely even more despicable, because he constantly threatens Tyrion. But the thing that's revealed, obviously, at the end of the season, is that it is ultimately shown that she is used as a weapon against Tyrion in more ways than one, both in the trial and then later as an emotional manipulation. It shows like just some even more like really fucked up behavior on Tywin's part also. And I think it's a territory that was so screwed up that even George R.R. Martin didn't want to dive into it, because again, Tyrion doesn't see Shay again after this episode until the trial, and then when he finds her in Tywin's bedroom. And the whole thing is, before Tywin can even explain the purpose of that, he just kills Tywin, because he's like, I don't even want to hear any explanation from you. I'm so done with all this pain and torture and misery that you've put me through. But I think it's really interesting, again, how they're kind of foreshadowing and kind of how the fate goes, where even though I've already kind of outlined and laid out the differences between Shay in the show versus the book, she's a much more sympathetic character in the show. I still find it really interesting how they use that ambiguity around them to their advantage. I think it creates a lot of really interesting and different and really messed up storytelling decisions that, again, you don't see from most other shows. And, and of course, unfortunately, resulted, of course, the breakup scene where Tyrion has to make up this whole dog and pony show about, it's like, oh, you're not fit to marry me, you're not fit to bear my children, I have a wife, I have responsible now,
Yeah, at one point, doesn't he say, how many guys have you been with? 500? 5,000? Like 50,000? Yeah, he just keeps adding a zero on there, and it's like, dude, like, it's a little transparent what he's doing, but obviously, it's like he's trying, like you said, like, that abandoned puppy you found on the side of the street that's following you home. Your parents tell you, like, oh no, we can't keep that, and then you start throwing sticks at it to get it to go. That's pretty much like the scenario he's ended up in.
Colorful metaphor right there.
Yeah, well, hey, listen, unfortunately, that's what the situation is, because the Lannisters, treat commoners as if they're just like loyal little puppies. And so I think the metaphor works. I don't think it works in regards to, Shay, who's, clearly intelligent. She's not sort of necessarily completely blind in this situation. She's in love.
But she's also got a little bit of naivete because she keeps saying that, oh, we'll fight your family and all this. And Tyrion's like, okay, you understand that if that happens, there will be no fight. You'll just be dead.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those things where she's looking for him to go all in on the relationship and really, exit the Game of Thrones, right? It's like you don't have to do that stuff. You don't have to play, but it's what he's good at, right? He can't, just get on a boat and live in that house that he keeps mentioning to her across the narrow sea. Basically, he has to be a part of this game. And I think that's really the big issue here is like, she might not be communicating it on screen, but ultimately it's kind of like, hey, let's go run off, leave this stuff behind. It's just you and I. And he could totally do that. He could totally set up a nice small existence with her across the sea and not worry about his family or anything like that. But ultimately he just doesn't drop it. He wants to continue playing the game, even though his hand at current moment is not that good. And, he's willing to drop her, and push her off to the side to support his place in playing the Game of Thrones.
Yes, indeed. And as we see later on, he talks with Bronn once they're actually at the wedding, after party, and he's like, make sure. And you can tell, obviously, he still has feelings for her because he's constantly asking over and over again, she's on the ship. Did the ship leave the harbor and all that? And Bronn's like, as she's on the ship, I saw her get on there. Nobody knows about it, but you, me, and Varys. And he's like, now go and drink so much wine until you feel like you've done the right thing. Just again, Bronn. I want to go. I want to see what Bronn's therapy sessions would be like. I feel like they would just be so instrumental and helpful to people. But so we got the next.
I don't know if therapy is what Bronn would be doing. I think he might just like go pick a fight at a tavern, like he did in season 2.
He does offer some incredible words of wisdom though at times. So we cut to the next scene. It is Joffrey. At that same scene where Tywin ordered Shay brought to his tower. Joffrey is receiving his wedding gifts. He receives a book from Tyrion, makes this whole grand speech about history, and then
we should find time for wisdom. And like now
and immediately gets sword and chops it in half. It's like, wow, talk about being a spoiled brat. But of course, we get to again. This is the moment that has been built up all of last season. It's funny because the Red Wedding is such a pivotal moment, but it was only really announced like a couple episodes before it happened, so it really wasn't built up. But this wedding, they have been talking about this stupid thing and how expensive and lavish and garnish it is for the entirety of last season. And oh man, I don't think the term spared no expense has ever applied to something more than it has this, because as Olenna constantly states, this thing is big, this thing is grandiose, it is expensive. They've got jugglers, they've got fire breathers, they've got all sorts of.
So, Dom, what's your favorite part of this wedding?
Oh my God, where do I even
favorite moment?
Well, I mean, we start off with just Olenna just trading more barbs with Tywin, and again, just showing that it's aptly this episode is aptly titled "The Lion and the Rose" because the lion may be dominant right now, but they are relying on the rose in more ways than one, as she is constantly reminding him. And she also brings up the latest instance of the Iron Bank and saying it's like, yes, they always get their due, knowing, almost indicating like she knows that the Lannisters owe hundreds and the crown.
So you like the conflict between basically the Tyrells and the Lannisters.
Well, that's the whole underlying factor.
How there's a subtext under the whole thing.
Absolutely. It's the Lannisters. It's the whole point of this episode and this party. The Lannisters are celebrating and so embroiled in their victory over the Starks that they don't see the snake in the grass. It's ironic that all of Cersei's conflicts with Marjorie felt so petty when she may have had a legitimate reason to be concerned about the Tyrells, considering what they're able to pull off in this episode.
Yeah. I also, hey, listen, my favorite moment is not just this secret hidden agenda that Olenna has that we get revealed like 2 seasons later, that she was the mastermind behind it. But I like the fact that Joffrey picks up that sword to cut into that pie and he kills like 4 of the doves that fly off. It's like, what a way to cut the pie. He's supposed to just cut it and let all the birds go. But unfortunately, he just like slaughters a bunch of birds. Like he cannot even have a wedding that's for his sort of solidification of his kingdom without slaughtering animals in front of everybody.
It's the ultimate example
insane.
of Lannister. I don't think there's a better example of Lannister excess than Joffrey, where Joffrey has gotten everything that he could have possibly wanted. He's king. All his enemies are grounded to the dirt. Robb Stark, who he had a little bit of a jealousy for, is now dead at his feet. He can constantly throw it in humiliated Sansa, and yet somehow, with all of these things going towards him, he is still bored. I love the camera shot that goes like behind the back of his head. It just shows how bored he is at all of the different, all these
exactly, the amusements,
excess that's being presented in front of him.
His own fool, the musicians, like everything. Like, I will say this, like, it goes back to my theory I've been saying the whole show is like, when someone is not playing the Game of Thrones, like someone is being obnoxious, someone is, doing exactly what Joffrey is doing to the max here. They're on the chopping block, right? He's not playing the game. He, is self-centered. He's throwing coins, making a mockery of what it means to be a king, what it means to be the seat of power. And, everybody there that's playing the game, Marjorie, Cersei, Tywin, Olenna, like everybody that's there, the main characters are really just like, they have to sit through this and they really can't say anything. They really can't stop it.
Even though they want to.
Yeah, but they're playing the Game of Thrones. They want to be on that throne one day. And right now, Joffrey can have his little tantrums. He can do, all this type of stuff that is going to get him noticed and ultimately get him killed. And, hey, it's just moments away. It's like all these little tantrums of like, throwing money at the musicians because he's bored, killing the doves in the pie, all the way to.
And that's not even the worst of what happens in there. As we see, again, there's so many great little moments that continue to sow the tension. Like it's crazy because it's almost like the opposite of the Red Wedding, where the Red Wedding, when things start to go down, it's almost like it happens out of nowhere. And if anything, in hindsight, it makes the twist reveal. But there's really nothing to indicate that what's about to go down until the one phrase shuts the door. Here, there is just so much tension and so much underlying and so much bitterness that's happening between all these characters. Like I said, you got so many great sequences. Jaime tries to flex on Loras, tells him that, you'll never marry Cersei. She'll kill you and any child that you put in her in your sleep. And Loras throws it right back at him. And it's like, yeah, and guess what? Neither are you, buddy. And then, Brienne tries to express her thing to Marjorie, and then Cersei comes up to her, and Cersei is immediately turned off by how Brienne is unable to answer when she directly asks him. It's like, oh, so you've hopped around quite a bit. First Renly, then Catelyn, then my brother. She's like, I'm not loyal to your brother. She's like, do you love him? And she isn't able to answer. There's so much growing bitterness. She immediately undercuts Marjorie's decision to have all of the extra food that will not be consumed at the wedding, be given to the poor.
Pycelle, man.
Immediately goes to Pycelle.
It's like, hey, listen, Pycelle, give this to all the poor people in the town. And then Cersei's like, no, you will give it to the hounds, or I'll give you to the hounds.
Or I'll give you to the hounds.
What a threat,
it's so great. It's so great.
So pretty much, if she ever hears word that he gave food after the wedding, it's like he's gone. He's a goner.
That's not even getting to the best part, where that's also forgetting that Tywin and Cersei have a run with Oberyn and Ilaria, and they have
that was amazing.
Where they have just more vocal sparring back and forth. It's like, oh wow, you look down on us because we actually legitimize bastards because they're born out of love and passion, and because they're born out of wedlock, we still actually treat them like human beings, but you guys condone rape and murder of children. Wow, crazy. Who's the more uncivilized version?
Yeah, it's a good thing your daughter was sent to the latter place where that doesn't happen.
Amazing. Like, again, continuing to sow the tension. Again, like the Martells are new on the scene, but they are just as much of a threat to the Lannisters as the Tyrells continue to be. And again, just amazing. So I have to rewatch this scene every single time. The scene when Olenna comes up to Sansa and tries to comfort her, and you see her pull the jewel off of the necklace that Dantos gave her. And again, it happens off screen, but you could almost see her place it in Joffrey's cup when Joffrey places the cup down after Tyrion says it. But let's get to it. Let's wrap this up. Let's get to the main course of this episode. Joffrey states, again, he's so bored. It's his ultimate display of being nothing but a petulant child, where he brings out this troop of dwarves in order to enact this mocking, farcical reenactment of the War of the Five Kings, dressed up in...
Again, it's everything, man. It's like he's, obviously it's, you're getting, just small people that are like Tyrion, to dress up and mock him, like in Joffrey's minds, these are just tools to him, right? They're small, they're dwarfs. They're all the derogatory things that people have come up with over time. That's all they are to Joffrey, and he just pays them to mock Tyrion, and it's just everybody there at the wedding is horrified, right? It's like except for Tomlin. Tomlin is actually amused because
You still can't
he's
get
just
the name right. I love it.
what
Tommen.
Tommen. I'm sorry, Tommen.
I love
But
it. I love it.
Tommen is not worth remembering. He's just like
No,
he's just not witty enough. He's the only one that's amused by this farce that basically mocks Tyrion and
Aside from Joffrey, who's laughing his ass off.
yeah, a whole bunch of people. Well, he's also like
nobody finds this funny. Nobody
uncharacteristically Joffrey's like uncharacteristically drunk, right? Because he's like spitting up his wine. He's indulging in alcohol more than we've ever seen him in the show at his wedding, and it kind of makes sense because that's when you would enjoy it. But for the most part, it's the fact that he's just spitting all over himself in joy, watching someone dressed up as Renly and someone dressed up as him, and they're basically just openly mocking Robb Stark.
To the point where they literally
Renly,
have like the little stuffed mannequins that they're mock riding. Stannis is riding a version of Melisandre. Renly is riding a version of something that's meant to be implied to be Loras. So much so that Loras just can't even take it and walks right out of the party. And it just leads to, again, probably one of the most tense sequences in the entirety of the show, which is insane because, again, it's another intense sequence where up until the poison, there is no blood that is shed because Joffrey tries to get Tyrion to go out and join them, and Tyrion throws it right back at him, where he throws it back, where he's like, it wouldn't do your brave part in the Battle of Blackwater Justice. It basically kind of mocks him and calls him out for the coward that he is. Before Joffrey goes over, dumps wine all over his head, and forces him to like kind of mock act as his cupbearer. Yeah,
what a response! Like Tyrion goes out of his way and says he's a coward in essentially language that cannot be refuted.
Yes.
He's not saying anything direct, but everybody there at the wedding understands what is being said, and it's said so elegantly that it's like the only thing Joffrey can do is childishly walk over and pour wine all over Tyrion.
And then uses power, his remaining power as king, I should say, in order to make Tyrion refill it and act as his cupbearer. And it is the amount of tension that happens between when Tyrion is holding out the wine cup and Joffrey's trying to get him to kneel. It's like, we know obviously that Tyrion didn't poison him, but you would obviously be very forgiving for Tyrion if he did.
Yeah, it's like kneel, and like the two of them are basically locked.
Loki from the Avengers, the first Avengers movie, is what it sounded like in hindsight.
Yeah. So the thing is, like, the two of them are at each other's throats. It's only going to be a matter of time. Like, this could be it.
Right.
Like this could be one of their deaths right here and now at the wedding. And if not so, if Joffrey wasn't poisoned, you would think like, hey, we're going to have in an episode or two, we're going to see some sort of plot that's devastating to one or both of them. Right. But ultimately, he asked for his, basically the pie arrives. This is where all the pigeons get murdered, unfortunately. And then he picks his wine back up. And, starts to drink it. And then he's like, uncle, you can't go anywhere, blah, blah, blah. And then that's when his coughing fit begins.
What's so interesting about how the execution of this scene happens is obviously we know that Tyrion has nothing to do with the actual plot itself. It's all
that's really good.
Has revealed, and that's amazingly well done. But what's so interesting, and I remember too when I read this, I remember very, very vividly, because the thing that was so shocking to me is I'm like, okay, I knew that Joffrey's wedding and death was going to happen at some point this season, but I thought it was going to be a thing that they like maybe waited until the midpoint for, did for episode 5, similar to what they did with Renly's death back in season 2. No, the most shocking thing to me, and I still remember this like it was yesterday, is I was down in Florida. My uncle had taken us to Epcot, and I remember, just catching up with the plot summary, because just to see what was going to happen in the episode before I watched that night. And I'm like, wait, They did Joffrey's wedding and death in the second episode. I was shocked. I was blown away. And so upon watching it, like, it amazed me even more how they're able to execute that and how they're able to use that as like the jumping off point in order to kickstart the events of this season. But what's even more fascinating about how the scene goes out is it makes me reflect back to the books, because the whole interesting thing about, because it's all told from Tyrion's perspective, is that in the books, Tyrion and the way that you see his inner monologue as written on the page, it almost makes it seem like he's fully expecting to not walk out of that wedding alive. And so, if anything, his actions are almost done from an amount of desperation. So it's like, okay, if I'm not walking out of here alive, because he knows that Joffrey has something planned for him, I'm at the very least going to go out with my dignity or what I can in the face of my family. And so it's almost even more shocking with that knowledge when he sees Joffrey start choking, you know? And it's almost like, it's not even a matter of like glee. It's almost just a matter of like, he had such this one idea of what was going to happen in his head that when the reverse happens, he's almost more shocked than we are. And it makes the scene that much more impactful as far as how it's executed, because again, this is a death that we have been waiting for season after season. This is a character that has done nothing but inflict torture and misery on every single person that he's come into contact with. And so when it does happen, the way that they're able to engineer that and make it still seem surprising, it is brilliant. You know, all props to George R. R. Martin.
Ultimately, Joffrey is the one that brings all the bad to the Lannister clan, because if it wasn't for Joffrey and him taking Ned's head off, or him torturing Sansa, you know, him just sort of making a mockery of everybody, even at his wedding, you know, it's like Renly and Loras are made fun of, you know, it's like, it's just one of those things where like he just does not care about any tact and having any personal allies and playing the game where it's like you can't just outwardly attack your opponent, because, you know, slighting them and you know, shaming them publicly, you know, they have to react. You know, you're forced to actually step up and do something. And so, you know, who knows what Loras would have done? Who knows what you know, anybody else would have done had the wedding just kind of ended, everyone went home and called it a day. But you know, hey, Olenna, you know, basically Littlefinger,
Academy Award caliber performance from her, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. The two of them, you know, orchestrated this whole thing. They knew from, you know, a season ago at least, maybe even longer, that Joffrey had to go. You know, they saw the writing on the wall just like everybody else who attended that wedding.
Yeah.
And so the plan was in motion, and they got him right then and there. They were able to poison that one.
And the creme de la creme, as if watching him slowly realize what was happening on his face, slowly collapse, sputter as they spin him around, his face congesting him, like having vomit as he slowly suffocates in his. The fact that he does it in Cersei's arms. Oh, it's the cherry on top of arguably the most. I know that obviously Ramsay getting eaten by the dogs at the end of season 6 comes close. But
yeah, it's really good.
After 3 seasons worth of just miserable, painstaking, awful deaths to all the characters that we were rooting for, all the good characters, probably the most satisfying death on the entire show.
Yeah, and
one of the most
Jaime's there as well. You know,
Yes.
so it's both his you know, parents, you know, the public one and the private one. Basically are there holding their child as he dies. And, you know, that's something that everybody actually acknowledges is probably true. Like, you know, it's an open secret. You know, it didn't help that Ned kind of, you know, made it apparent to everybody in his letters that he sent across the realm.
Well, he sent to Stannis, and then that Stannis sent across the realm.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, you know, it's the news is out there. You know, and so this is sort of
Westeros' worst kept secret.
Yeah, so it's very poetic that, you know, the plot ends in that way. His real parents there holding their child, you know, and he dies, you know,
Yes.
and Cersei, I think, in one of the biggest bumbling moves she ever makes, turns around, looks at Tyrion, sort of like investigating the cup.
Literally left holding the cup as Dantos, his Littlefinger's agent, immediately gets Sansa out of there.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, essentially she just accuses him right off the bat. And, you know, it's mainly because she never liked Tyrion. You know, and obviously they had a little spat and now he's dead. But, you know, if you know, and maybe it's just a mother enraged and in mourning and
Yeah.
suffering, that just leads her to accuse him openly right then and there. But ultimately, if you take a logical step back, like, that's not good. Like,
No,
you
it's not. And if
basically,
anything, it does more as far as setting Tyrion up for helping to destabilize more of the Lannister clan than really any other decision. Like I said, it's
exactly.
insane to me how. So now that Joffrey is out of the way, how Cersei ultimately ends up being even more of the unraveler of her family, as we see all the way up until the finale. I will say though, the one other tidbit that I'll add there is that this season was Lena Headey's first Emmy nomination for the entirety of the show, and I think she more than earned it with this scene alone. Just her kind of the combination of like her motherly instincts towards her son, as well as kind of channeling that frustration and anger towards, along with many other just ill feelings towards towards Tyrion and towards Dinklage. It's amazing.
Yeah, Elena, must have like really enjoyed the
Sure.
result of this plot. Like, she took a risk, put herself, out there. Like, she could have been caught and imprisoned and killed pretty easily if anyone noticed what she did with the wine glass. And the fact is,
hell, I didn't even notice until like the fourth time I watched the episode.
yeah, she gets away with it. And not only that, but Cersei's immediately gunning for Tyrion. And it's like, okay, now there's tension within the family. Like, Tyrion, when pushed up against the wall, defended them at the Battle of Blackwater. Like, he was a Lannister, and he made the right moves and protected the family and made them a strong unit. And immediately, Joffrey's death and just the way it happened so publicly with this whole back and forth bitter between Tyrion and Joffrey, it just leads to a fracturing of family members, and unfortunately, that little chip at their structure is what allows
for the unravelment of their family. Yeah, like
exactly.
I said, I've talked a lot about Tywin's fatal flaw, but this is the beginning of, like I said, we don't get as much of it with Cersei. We get much more of it in the next two seasons, like as far as kind of the characters that we follow throughout this middle act of Game of Thrones, but it shows Cersei as we get to know her more as a character and we get more of her backstory, shows that her ultimate fatal flaw is the fact that she is always going to prioritize her and those closest to her's personal safety over kind of the, what the smarter moves are, as we see here. And so that's it. That is our recap of The Lion and the Rose. In hindsight, I still don't know.
And the poison. Don't forget that.
And the poison, of course. Can't forget that. I personally do still think that this is one of the best episodes of the entire show. I love how it's structured. I love how the tension is so throughout it. It results in probably the most satisfying death on the entire show of one of the most hated characters in all of television. This was obviously Jack Gleason's last performance of the show. And I will say that even though his character was despicable, he did a fantastic job portraying him for the three.
Well, his sadism will live on with Ramsay. We saw the passing of the torch, in the beginning of the episode, with them chasing this poor woman down in the woods.
Yes. And also R.I.P. to Tansy, who Ramsay brutally had his hounds murder, and the three people that Melisandre burned on Dragonstone. Again, we're still keeping the death count going, people.
Well, a little bit. Yeah, we kind of fallen off the boat.
It happened. We haven't had as many main character deaths, really. That's the problem. We had like a little bit of a dry spell up until the Red Wedding happened last season. But this season, we're going to see a lot more bodies hit the floor. So
yeah, listen, last episode, the Hound got those chickens and got rid of a bunch of Lannister men. Like, that was a pretty brutal fight sequence.
You gotta think. Yeah. You gotta think what's going on in Tywin's head. Where it's like, man, what a bitch! I literally just went out of my way. Ain't life a bitch? Where I just went out of my way to engineer this whole wedding in order to take out the Starks, and now we got my prized grandson and heir being taken out in his own goddamn wedding. Obviously, in hindsight, it kind of works out more for him because Tommen's definitely a lot easier to control than Joffrey, but still, it just.
Well, yeah, until oh my god.
Oh my God! I have a crossbow sticking out of me while I'm on the toilet. Oh my God! He jumped out a window.
Well, no, that's Tywin, but I'm talking about the young kid who's like, "Oh, my beautiful bride, I could have any other woman in the realm, but the one beautiful bride that actually talked to me, because no one in the family talks to me, and I'm like alone." Like, no, listen, like, everyone treats him like a kid. They don't really allow him to have a personal opinion. He's isolated. He's trapped. Marjorie, does what she always does. She sees a hole in the marketplace and then goes to fill it. And the fact that, King's Landing, they all hated Joffrey because he brutalized, not only, Ned Stark and the Stark family, but he brutalized the people of King's Landing. Like, he just didn't treat them as if they were people. He disrespected them. So Marjorie came in, she set up these charitable programs and really won the love of the people. And she does the same thing, with this new, basically marriage that she has to. How many marriages is she going to have, by the way? Essentially. She goes in there and realizes that he's just alone. He's kept isolated. He's controlled, and she basically makes him feel comfortable talking with her, giving out his opinions, and even though she's a little bit older and manipulating him completely, it's one of those things where it works hook, line, sinker. Even when the Sparrow comes to town, he's older. He's able to use his isolation against him as well. So it's not really like he's in for a good time the next couple seasons.
As we see, the next couple seasons are going to wreak havoc on the Lannisters because this is only the beginning. We'll be recapping everything that's going to be happening with the Lannisters and everybody else on this jolly joy ride toward the finale. And in the next couple of coming weeks, we'll be back next week with episode 3 of season 4, Breaker of Chains. Once again, thank you guys so much for tuning into this most recent episode of Talkin' Thrones. Be sure to click the like button and the subscribe button if you watch this on the YouTube channel. Pat, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
Hey, listen, you can find me here on Talkin' TV, Talkin' Thrones with you, Dominic. I do have an Instagram account at Patrick W. Huber. Go ahead and subscribe. Maybe if I get enough subscribers, and I'll post something at some point. I keep threatening that, but one day I might actually take myself up on that and post something
one of these days. And of course, follow me at Movie Nerd Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and be sure to follow the actual podcast Instagram at official Talkin' TV Podcast. Just add the word official in front of that Talkin' TV Podcast that you see down there below. Be sure to keep tuning into new episodes of Talkin' Thrones that we put up on YouTube and Spotify every Friday. Be sure to keep tuning into new podcast episodes that are streamed live on Sundays and then put up on Mondays. And be sure to keep track of our Book of Boba Fett recaps. We've got episode 3 going up on the channel by the time this video will go up. And as always, people, remember, watch more fucking movies. 12
seasons. Murder less doves, man.
Murder less doves.
I think that's a good word of wisdom.
We'll see you guys next time.